What's up, everybody? Welcome into Group Chat Football Live. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. This is our daily show talking the biggest news in college football, transfer news, coaching movement, recruiting news, and of course, the transfer portal is officially open. So we have a lot to talk about in that respect. But D, let's start with Nico Iamaleava. Of course, the talk of college football, the biggest story. I would say arguably in sports in terms of the discussion points that we've had here nationally and kind of where college football has gone, college sports have gone the last few years here with NIL. And it looks like it's an interesting situation because he may have played himself.
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about big stories and Nico being the center of it. He was the center of paying high school quarterbacks, right? Because his deal was the one that really got that started. How you're paying, multi-million dollars over multiple years for a guy who's never played college football. So he kind of started that, or at least he was the face of that. And now we're seeing him as the face of whatever you call this, the renegotiation, sort of the 1-year contract free agency model. So I assumed UCLA was going to be the spot for Nico. When you heard Notre Dame, USC dropping out, UCLA made a lot of sense. But now you're hearing that is not even close to a done deal. Matt Zennett's saying that there's not much traction there. Nico's was a little more charitable from On3 is saying there was some traction, but he noted that Nico's brother Madden, who was pretty much expected to go to UCLA, blindsided them at the last minute and went to Arkansas. Same staff. So they have not forgotten. This was just this past recruiting period. So they have not forgotten that happened. And I have assumed that before you commit a ton of money to a player like Nico, if you're UCLA, that's something you got to think about. So with him, there's reports that even G5 schools are kind of monitoring the situation. I'd be more concerned if I'm Nico right now with where am I going to play and look good and potentially set myself up for a pro contract than where am I going to get the most NIL money? Because the way this all played out really did not work in his favor.
Well, and we saw reports yesterday as well that some schools are waiting for that number to drop closer to $1 million a year before they even get involved in these sort of discussions. So it seems like schools are monitoring where it's at. I think there will be takers, but at a certain number, right? And obviously the number doesn't seem to be there right now.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see this market develop. A school that jumps out to me, Pete, and we talked about this before we went on, FSU, right? So they have Castellanos from Boston College, a fit in Gus Malzahn's system. Gus Malzahn said he targeted Castellanos. He saw him like a Nick Marshall, who, by the way, got drafted as a non-quarterback in the pros for whatever that's worth. Would Malzahn go back to a more traditional quarterback? And Nico can run. He ran for over 300 yards last year in the SEC, but I would not call him a running quarterback the same way that you would talk about, a Castellanos. So fit-wise, from a schematic standpoint, FSU is not a good fit. But as far as a program, this is a desperate program right now. I mean, Norvell, he had such a high with that 2-season run. And then you look at the rest of his resume, not so good and coming off a really disastrous year. So this is a program that needs a spark. We see this in recruiting all the time, Pete, where you have like a program that just needs a boost, maybe a coach on a hot seat, and they grab a player that has a high recruiting ranking, but maybe he's falling for character reasons or whatever it is, and they just grab him. Maybe something like that happens here with FSU just being that desperate program that is not exactly happy with how the spring went. I don't know if that's true or not. You hear rumors, and they say, hey, Nico, give us a jump start. We will cater our offense to you, let you throw it a little bit more, maybe lean more into Norvell's background at developing quarterbacks, which is probably further along than Malzahn when it comes to the throwing side, and see where that goes, because it's hard to find a super clean fit as far as quarterback. Syracuse is one, I would say. They just had a tremendous passing game. They just lost their top receiver to the portal, Trevor Pena. So something's going on there. I don't know if the quarterback play is what they wanted in spring coming off Kyle McCord. Could he go there, play in a Power 4 conference, play on a system that's been good for quarterbacks? You got a dome, so you're out there throwing the ball. You lose your top receiver, but they'll have somebody there. Maybe That's an option, but it's hard to see too many paths for Nico if UCLA doesn't come through.
Kane's Cat T305 says someone clearly wants him if he has a no contact tag. Those no contact tags are tricky to me because I feel like it really limits, I think it limits certain programs. Like you mentioned G5 schools, right? I don't think he wants to necessarily land at a G5 school, right? But that's not to say that those conversations can't still happen throughout the grapevine. People reaching out on his behalf or reaching out to the people around him, the people representing him, right? But do not contact, they're not going to reach out to him directly, but I think it filters a lot of stuff out.
Yeah. And who knows where this process is going to go. He's been keeping us guessing. Someone proposed he takes a pay cut and goes back to Tennessee. That's probably the smartest option, right? I mean, Tennessee, talking about a playoff team that needs a quarterback. That's exactly where he should be. But of course, he's the reason they need a quarterback. So I don't know what the upside is here for him with this move, unless he goes to a system. And I think this is really the move that's going to highlight his passing. It's going to make it easier for him to pass. Maybe the competition is not as tough. Maybe he goes to the Big 12. Maybe he goes G5, ACC, just something that's a lesser league than the Big 10, than the SEC. And they open up the passing game with him because Tennessee did not throw the ball a ton last year. They were in the 90s as far as passing offense. So if you go to a team that's throwing the ball, he's got a great arm, he's got great size. He will convince an NFL team to take a chance on him if he puts up big passing numbers. I think that is his best bet. And he's got to stop thinking about where am I going to get the next NIL payday, and think about where am I going to develop myself and rehabilitate myself as an NFL prospect, kind of like how Spencer Rattler did, right? Some other guys that maybe had some negative stuff around them and then were able to change the narrative. That's what he needs, whether it's like Rattler in another SEC school. I find that unlikely. Big 10, if it's not UCLA, you wonder where that would be. I think more likely Big 12, ACC, G5 sounds insane, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned it. He's probably learning right now that he's got to set himself up for his future more so than just the next dollar here. But yeah, man, it's gonna be interesting to see how this unfolds without a doubt.